Hello and welcome to this workshop. Now, before we do anything, I just want to say a massive thank you to the team over at Hack the Box for putting on such a great event, but for also inviting me to come along and take part. Now, this is my first Cyber Apocalypse talk, but hopefully just one of many. Now, this workshop is all about a beginner's guide to web hacking. Now, before we jump into that though, however, as I'm aware of most of you probably don't know who I am, I just want to take a quick second to introduce myself. So my name is Sam Thompson. I have, scarily thinking about it, 10 plus years of IT experience. Now, about 7 of those is in the security space, working for some of the world's largest security vendors. Now, aside from my day job, I also teach computer networking and security. And I've also put in an aspiring script kiddie because even though I have those years of IT experience and security experience, I still class myself as being very new in the ethical hacking space. So like a lot of you watching, I'm still learning all of this stuff. And Hack the Box has been a great resource for me to do that. Now, moving on. This workshop, we're actually going to be doing a walkthrough of a past CTF challenge. So the past Cyber Apocalypse 2022 Intergalactic Post. Now, if you are a Hack the Box VIP subscriber, you can actually go back and access past challenges. And the way you would do that is you would go to Hack the Box, go to tracks on the left-hand side. Then you can select the Cyber Apocalypse 2022 track, and in here you will find all of the past challenges, including the Intergalactic Post Challenge, which is what we're going to be doing the walkthrough today on. Once you select it, you can start the instance up and download the challenge files. So let me jump into my Kali box and we'll get started. So as you can see, I've already downloaded the challenge folder and it's there called Intergalactic Post on the desktop. Now, when you're approaching a web challenge like this, more often than not, you're going to want to look at the requests that you're sending to the web server and what they're sending back. Now, the easiest way to do that is by opening an application called Burp. So we'll go to the menu button and type Burp and open that up. We'll click OK through the prompts. We'll go to a temporary project, that's fine, and use the defaults. So what Burp does or allows us to do is to view and even modify the requests being sent to the web server. So to do that, we just go over to Proxy, and the easiest way to set Burp up is just to press this Open Browser button right here from the Proxy tab. If I click that, it's going to open up a Chrome browser for us to use. So what I'm going to do is go over to Hack the Box, grab my IP address for my target, and paste it right into here. So this is now our target website. As you can see, lots of cool graphics going on, but other than that, not really much to it. It looks like this is an email sign-in form. Now, a good place to start with these web challenges is very, very basic. I like to start looking at the source information. So we can press Ctrl U and open up the source. Now here we may see comments from the developers. There might be references to other interesting fields. Lots of interesting things can be found here in the source. Now for this particular challenge, I've actually already looked through this, and bit of a spoiler alert, there's nothing in here for us to look at. But it's always a good place to start and quite often missed when you want to dive straight into the more advanced stuff. So what we'll do, we'll close this down and we're back to this main page. So as we said, this looks like an email opt-in form. There's not much else going on here. So we could just go in here and we'll do a test, subscribe me to the truth button, And we are then met with a message saying, please submit a valid email address. So this kind of indicates they're doing some sort of validation on that email, which is bad news for us because it kind of limits our option to playing around with this user input, especially as it seems to be the only thing that we seem to be able to do on this page. So just to double check that it is working, I am just going to go test at, let's go test.com. Definitely not my email address, so please don't send anything there. Hit subscribe, and yeah, email subscribed successfully. So they're definitely doing some sort of validation here to prove that what we're entering here is in fact a valid email address. So this would be a good place to go back to Burp and actually see what happened behind the scenes then. So if we go back to Burp and go to, so that's a previous session, we'll close that down. If we go back to HTTP history, what we're going to do is, or what we're going to be met with is all of the requests that we sent and what the responses we received were. Lots of GET requests, lots of JavaScript going on here, but interestingly, we have a couple of posts. So if we click on our first post, we're doing a post request to /subscribe. Now, this is all the header information, but down here, we simply have email equals test. So that was our first input. And the response here on the right was, please submit a valid email. Then we have a second post, again to /subscribe. This time it was with the valid email address. And then we were met with a successful message. So that's great to see, but there's not really much of us to play around with. You know, there's just an email field. There's not much for us to change here. So we're kind of at a dead end. There's not a huge amount to change in the requests. There's nothing in the source information on the website. There's only a field that's validating emails. We're kind of stuck. So at this point, it would be a great move to go back and look at the source code that Hack the Box provided to us. So what we'll do is we'll minimize this and we'll go and focus our attention on this folder here. So we can click into here and we can see all of the information that Hack the Box provided to us. But the easiest way to look at this would be with some sort of text or code editor. There are loads of different options to do this, but one of the popular ones and the one I'm going to use is VS Code, which is Microsoft's free code editor and very, very powerful, allows us to see exactly what's going on here. So first thing I need to do is open up this folder. So I'm going to go to File, Open Folder, and it's on the desktop. So we go Desktop, Intergalactic Post, Web, and then Open. And this is going to open up our folder. So we can open up the challenge and we've got some files here. So this is quite clearly PHP files. So PHP being a coding or web coding language. Now you don't need to know PHP or you don't need to be an expert. Now, if you are an expert, fantastic. You're going to have such an easy time here. But if like me, you're not a PHP expert, then don't worry because we can just look out for keywords and Google is going to be our best friend. If we kind of trying to figure out what something is doing, then Google is definitely our best friend here. Probably the best place to start off something like this is going to be in the index.php. So index being the main page of this site. So if I click onto index, we're going to see some of this PHP. Now we see references to controllers. We see references to models. And we also, if we look down here, we see reference to a database. So there's some sort of database happening in the background in the temp directory. Now we also see our post request. Remember, post to subscribe or /subscribe. And this is referencing subs controller. Now, if we were to look on the left-hand side, we have controllers and we have a file called subs controller. So let's take a look into that. In here, we see it doesn't take us very long, but we can see something that looks potentially like the email function or the function to sign up for our email. We seem to be taking the user input of the email and saving that as the email variable. Now down here, it looks to be doing some sort of validation. And if you were to Google the filter_var, you would actually find out that this is doing the email validation to make sure that it is a correct format. And if it fails, that you can see the message to make sure that the valid email is submitted. Now, if it is valid, so we come down here and we can see reference to the subscriber model. Again, on the left-hand side, we see models. So it doesn't take us much to look at models and see there's a file called subscribermodel.php. So let's take a look into there. Now in here we have a function, and it seems to be taking or looking for a field called httpx forwarded for and using that for the get subscriber IP. If we look further down, it seems to then use that get subscriber IP and save that as the variable IP_address. And just below there, it seems to indicate that it's inserting into a database not only the IP_address, but also the email variable as well. So then we can see the database on the left. There is a database file. Let's click there. First thing that we should have a look, we can see is we have reference, there it is there, to SQLite. So SQLite is a type of database. So now we know what type of database is running on the back end here is SQLite, which could and will come in use for us. Now, if we were to scroll down a little bit here, we can actually see a SQL statement or an SQL statement. And it's here. Insert into the subscribers table, the column IP address and the column email, the variable IP address, which we just saw, and the variable email, which we know has to be a valid email address. So this gives us an opportunity because if we look here, it doesn't seem to be doing any validation on this SQL statement. Now, we already know we can't really modify this piece of information because it's looking for a valid email address. However, IP address, remember, if we go back to that subscriber model, we're using the get subscriber IP and potentially looking for something called a HTTPX forwarded for field. We may be able to use that and change that. So what we can do is simply just do a quick Google of what this is. So if I open up my Chrome and we'll do a quick search for that. And good old Wikipedia, we can see that the X forwarded for header field, so it's a header, is common method for identifying the originating IP address for a client connecting to a web server through a proxy. So that kind of makes sense as to why they're collecting that. So if a user was using a proxy, they want to try and get the originating IP address rather than the proxy IP address. So they're looking for that particular header. Now, Wikipedia is kind enough to even give us the format of that header. So we can go ahead and copy this. Now, the idea here is if we go back to our database, is we can control this field using the X header or X forwarded for and insert a malicious SQL statement or inject an SQL statement to then get control of this web server. So it's an SQL injection. And let me show you what I mean. So first of all, we need to add this header. So if we go back to Burp and we see our post, if we want to modify this, we just need to right click and send this to something called a repeater. Now repeater allows us, and it's up here at the top, allows us to resend requests, but also change those requests before we send them. So to give you an example, here's the request. I could just resend it. and then I get the email subscribed successfully back. Now, if you look at the header information, we don't actually have that X forwarder header there. So what we can do is I'm just going to pop it under a referrer. I'm just going to paste that in, X forwarded for, and then we can put in our information. So let's go back to the code. And what we're looking for is a way to import or use some malicious code here. So what we're going to do is, just for reference, I'm going to take a copy of this SQL statement and I'm going to create a new file and I'm just going to paste that in. This is what we're working with. So our task is to find a payload that we can replace this section here with. So what we're going to do is go back to our Chrome, and a great place to find pre-made payloads is a place called Payloads All the Things. Payloads All the Things is a fantastic GitHub full of very common payloads. So if we click into here, there's tons and tons of payloads that we can use, and we just need to find the one that we need. So we are looking for a SQL injection. So if we scroll down with there's SQL injection, we'll click into there. Then remember, it's SQLite. So SQLite is here. And then we have a number of different payloads that we could potentially use against SQLite. Now, the one that looks interesting to us is the remote code execution using the attached database. So if we click onto there, it gives us this payload here, and we'll explain it in just a second. But for now, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to take that back into my Word document. Paste that in, and just to make it easier to see, I'm going to make that onto one line. And what we're going to try and do is insert or inject this SQL statement into our IP address field. So the first thing that it's going to be looking for is this bit. So this is the bit we're replacing, and we're going to need to finish it off so it doesn't error. So we're going to copy this part and put that at the front of our statement. And we're going to change this for an email address. So we're going to go, an IP address. So 1.1.1.1. That sounds good. And we need a valid email address. Remember, it will tell us off if we don't. So we'll go test@test.com. And that should finish, if we go back here, that should finish that statement here. So get rid of those bits. That should finish that. And then we're going to close this using a semicolon. But then we're going to insert our own SQL statement that it's not necessarily expecting, that will hopefully give us some control over this web server. So what this is doing is we're attaching a new database, and we're going to use a file called lol.php. And we're going to attach this as a database called LOL. Then we're going to create a table within that database called pwn, and insert some text to that table. And that text is a very basic PHP web shell. Now, the idea behind this is we'll be able to insert a file with a web shell that will execute when we browse to it, giving us control of the server. Now, I know that sounds complicated, but just give me a second. So, very first thing that we do need to change here, though, is the directory. Now, we could play around with this until this works, but there are some telltale signs of where to upload this file to. In fact, if we go to the config file here, there is a nice little config file here. And if we see that our root directory is shown right here, so it's just www. So we're going to change our payload, just remove that var folder out to just www/lol.php. So by copying all of this, we should be able to trick the web application to inserting this new database. If I go back to our burp and insert our payload here, hit the send button, email subscribed successfully. So far, so good. We're going to now browse to a file that we hopefully uploaded. We don't know for sure because we're doing what's called a blind SQL injection here. We're going to look for this lol.php file. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back to our Chrome, our target. So remove all of this. And with a bit of luck, type lol.php. And we see some text. It's gibberish at the moment, but that's a good thing. There is a file there. So we've done something. We've added this file. Now, to take advantage of this web shell, what we need to do is add a question mark at the end, type cmd equals, and then we can use our commands. So a very common one, just to get an idea of if it works, is to type the id command. If we press enter, we can actually see at the end, you see that? That's a response from the server. So we have code execution on this machine. And the way we've done it is we crafted a SQL injection that kind of used the IP address field, and we used it to add a new database, which in turn added a new file, which allowed us to get this payload, this execution. So how do we find the flag? Hack2Box usually puts the flag somewhere in the root directory, so we can type ls space / to see what is in the root directory. Is always a good place to start. Press enter, and yep, in fact, I can see there is a text document in the root directory called flag. So if I wanted to see that, I would come in here, type cat space paste, and that is where I am going to leave it. Because if you do want to go ahead and try this yourself with your VIP subscription, then I don't want to ruin it for you. I want you to come in through here, find the flag, get the answers yourself rather than just copying it from here. So I'm going to leave you to go and find that yourself. But hopefully, I will flick back to my presentation now. And there we go. So hopefully you found this valuable. You learned something from this workshop. And I just want to wish you all of the best in the CTF. And I will see you next time.